So One Night Miami has been out for a few days now. It's out on Amazon Prime and in theaters. It's the directorial debut of Regina King. I like her as an actress, and I was excited to see what she'd do as a director. Also, this has a lot of Oscar buzz surrounding it with the performances and just as a possible Best Picture nominee. So I was pretty excited to see One Night Miami, and I really enjoyed it. I think that it took some time to really find its footing. I think that towards the beginning, maybe the editing and the fact that Regina King is like a first-time director kind of showed. But after a certain point, I think the movie really found its groove. I loved all the ideas being presented. I love the characters. They were really well handled and well realized, in my opinion. The performances were excellent, and it seems pretty deserving of the hype for the award season. Now, I haven't read a single review for it yet, at least since watching it. I probably read a couple reviews whenever it first came out in whatever film festival, maybe TIFF, I don't know. But I haven't read anything since watching it, so I'm going into this pretty much completely blind. I don't even know what the average score of it is on Letterboxd right now, so we're going to find out together. I'm going to read some reviews, give my thoughts on them, see if I formulate some more cohesive opinions from them, and yeah, let's get started. So I gave the movie 4 stars, as you can see right now on screen. I really enjoyed it. One of the best movies this year so far, in my opinion. And let's check the average rating, which is, okay, 3.8. That's not bad. It's actually very good. I was expecting maybe a little bit higher because I thought everyone was like more hyped on it. But I don't know. Maybe the reviews will be more, not middling, I guess, but not as incredible as, I don't know, Nomadland or one of those other good things I haven't seen yet. All right, we're looking through popular reviews right now. Matt Lynch gives it 3.5 stars. The 4 leads are all as excellent as you've heard, which really helps smooth over that the text is largely rhetorical and made me want to rewatch Michael Mann's Ali, which covers so much similar ground. I've seen Ali. I don't really remember it that well. I remember not really enjoying it. Michael Mann's a little hit or miss for me. I did really like the fact that the text of the film, sort of all of the conversations and everything, rely a lot on rhetoric and how to handle sort of the oppression and injustice that these people are facing, because that's a very hot topic right now, and I find it pretty interesting. And I thought that there was a lot of interesting ground covered. I thought that the conclusions that certain characters kind of came to were really insightful. I think the big examples are obviously how Malcolm X kind of comes around on certain things and Sam Cooke kind of comes around on certain things, those being the two opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of the main cast. And I don't really know much about these guys specifically. I haven't read a ton on them, but it did seem at least true to what I know. I don't think that the film didn't seem like it was holding back because it wanted to be a friendly Oscar contender. There's a lot of harsh viewpoints that are explored in here. And I watched this film with my mom, and it seemed to appeal to her. I feel like that kind of shows the film has a wider reach than you might expect for something that's, so specifically about black issues and stuff. I feel like a lot of people will be able to get something out of this, even those who may not think that they like Malcolm X or people who were a part of that movement, at least as long as they're, willing to watch the movie and listen to what's being presented. But yeah, I really liked sort of how the movie was about how to go about fighting injustice and stuff. I think that's really interesting. And really, that's when the movie started to come together for me, whenever it started to be specifically about that. There's a scene on a rooftop at some point, like maybe before halfway through, and then I felt like everything after that was like really great because it was all about those conversations about their differences and everything. It was much less like specific to the story. I get if that's not exactly the most appealing thing and you want to see like something that's less stagey, but yeah, I really enjoyed those discussions about all of that, the rhetoric. Ryan Daniel gives it 3.5 stars and says, "I'm so happy to see Regina King come out with such a strong debut. Despite this being based off of a play, she, as well as her cast, were able to work around those limitations perfectly and make the very most out of the material she had. Outside of some forced dialogue, it's written really well and is successful in being very entertaining and thought-provoking, though I think most of that is the result of Regina King's direction as opposed to the screenplay. I think the screenplay is pretty strong. I don't know if it's necessarily forced dialogue. Like towards the beginning, whenever Muhammad Ali is in the boxing ring and he's talking to his coach, he's like, "I got him on the ropes now," and the coach is like, "You got him on the ropes, but you're taking a beating." Muhammad Ali's like, "You're ugly," or I don't know. I just felt like sometimes the banter, I guess, was sort of, I don't know. It felt a little generic. But in terms of it being based off of play and how it feels because of that, I feel like it was really good at not always feeling so stagey. There's a lot of movies, obviously, that are based on plays that feel very obviously based on plays because they only take place in like one area or one or two areas. Fences comes to mind because I feel like that was a really kind of unsuccessful way to handle the staging aspect of a film like this. But I think this was a lot better. I feel like King's direction and camera work was a lot better at making it all feel more cinematic. I liked how it specifically followed some characters around that weren't necessarily involved in the action that was going on. It always wasn't involved in the two people who were arguing. There were some moments that specifically cut away from it to go to a character in another room to see how they were feeling, like just hearing the arguments and being removed from that situation. I thought that was a really inspired choice. I feel like she put enough life into it, specifically with the camera work, to make it feel not as staged and sort of stale as other films can be whenever they're based off of plays. So good on her. Directions gives it 3 stars and says, One Night Miami is a good film, but I'm unconvinced of it being a great one. The first half of this film is surprisingly and sadly hollow and made me want to watch other films that have tackled either the topic or the man talking in just one place for the whole film genre much better. The dialogue felt forced besides shining later on, and I don't very much like the look of this film. When modern movies are trying to tackle a certain timeline in history, whether it be the 50s, 60s, or 70s, I constantly have to think about the fake and clean looking costume design and the too bright lighting that can already be seen on the poster on LB. I can understand like being upset that a film that's supposed to take place in the past doesn't look like it. Uh, Obviously, that was like a slight problem with Mank too that I had, but I don't know. It's a minor detail for me. The second half shines in how it does. The dialogue started rolling and the strengths are shown in an instant, very well researched, incredibly smart, and finally engaging. It shows the flaws of the characters, but also shows what they're standing for so incredibly beautifully. You understand their arguments from their POV so incredibly well, their reactions feel very human, and there's a heart or soul that was entirely missing in the first half. It's satisfying, moving, and some lines that were written are extremely thought-provoking, and then it all comes together with a quite brilliant ending. Won't say too much, but it was quite powerful and moving. So yeah, I pretty much agree with this, although I didn't uh, not enjoy the first half, I guess, as much as this person did. But it definitely it starts to feel motivated at a certain point, much more than it did before. I think that's when the film like really understands what it's about and then actually starts to implement that with the characters instead of just building and building for a bit. I feel like maybe that much buildup was not like the best idea for something that's going to take place in mostly one spot over the course of one night. So I get how that could stand out to someone and kind of hamper their enjoyment of the movie. It did for me for a little bit, but I mean, just that second half is so good. I feel like it's worth it to watch the first half. It's not, it's not bad. This person doesn't even think it's bad. I mean, I think everyone's kind of in agreement that the movie isn't bad at first, just that it finds its footing a bit more after a certain point. All right, Jing gave it 4.5 stars, and I'm not going to read the whole review, but I will read the last part of it. The final montage was really what made me push what up to that point felt like 4 stars to 4.5. While the relevance of this movie and the way it was interwoven into the conversations without feeling forceful already made me consider giving this a 4.5, the final minutes substantially turned One Night Miami into a movie with 5-star potential for me. Of course, I didn't forget that the characters on screen are real people, but it wasn't until the final montage that really hit me and I started to truly grasp their individual sacrifices, determinations, and stories beyond that eponymous One Night in Miami. That's the reason I think this movie starts to work so well for me, is because of just how much it seems like it understands these characters. Again, I don't really have much attachment to them in real life, but I felt like legitimately invested in them and like their cause and how it relates to real life. I could see certain arguments they've made being relevant to arguments that you can make right now about civil rights. And I think the strongest point about this movie is not only how it uses those 4 perspectives to show what all of these people want from a civil rights movement, but also what kind of comes of that, because you start to see some consequences for some in the end, and then you start to see others sort of be more fulfilled once they start to sort of accept the fact that they have to have a role in this movement. And I think for a film like this with all these different perspectives, that sort of feels, kind of like a thesis about it. I feel like that's a very appropriate way to cap it off. And aside from being emotionally touching, I feel like it also shows where your role in a movement can kind of lead you and what satisfaction you can get out of that or not. All right, and last one, Theo gives it 4 stars and says there's a sort of gratifying boredom to be found with Regina King's directorial debut. The content isn't what is necessarily boring. Watching these 4 giants of history bash verbal heads sprawling with their words is irresistibly informative and exciting with their sharp and explosive dialogue. If anything, what works in One Night's favor is the unapologetic lack of extravagance despite being full of extravagant people. The eagerness to just show these monoliths of history with dignity, living, talking, arguing, loving, venturing into topics often left unspoken without overstuffing their encounter, as if the entire film was a love letter to them all, interested in only displaying these men and who they were and what they meant, while keeping a neutral, non-invasive stance on their views. I think this is probably why the film largely succeeds at not feeling like Oscar bait or something like a one of those friendly civil rights movies, I guess you would say, like Green Book. It's that there's like legitimate, sometimes militant, sometimes extreme viewpoints that are shown here. And I think the most compelling part about this film is the willingness to challenge all of that from every angle imaginable. There's 2 very different perspectives being shown with Malcolm X and Sam Cooke, and then Jim Brown and Cassius Clay both have the opportunity to rally behind one of them or the other, depending on who they feel is being more correct in a certain situation or handling their arguments a bit worse. It shows that even though some positions are understandable and not necessarily even wrong, it's just there's sometimes a wrong way to go about them. And that's, I think, pretty important and also pretty impressive, the ability to show so much difference amongst all of these people and maybe kind of irk people in the audience who might feel a certain way about one of those perspectives. I think everyone will find this film challenging in one way or another, whether they agree with one of the characters specifically or they're kind of in the middle. They'll find themselves being pulled back and forth a bit. I certainly was. If nothing, you'll get to see at least one different perspective and a couple arguments for and against that different perspective. And I think that's always a good thing. So yeah, from what I can gather, it seems like I'm sort of on the same page as a lot of people, although I think I enjoyed it a bit more. A lot of 3.5 stars I scrolled past just because certain things were kind of repeating with, the first half being not as good as the second, and also, performances being praised, Regina King being praised. There's the occasional 4.5, 5-star that I've seen here, but most of them seem to be, at least in the popular section, around 3.5 to 4 stars. Which makes sense. I mean, the film has an average of 3.8. I kind of figured going into this that I would be sort of on the lower end of how much people were enjoying this, but it seems like I'm enjoying it a little bit more than most, and then there's a couple people that are enjoying it about how much I expected. So yeah, slightly surprised with this. Not too crazy though. Again, I kind of totally get why people had a problem with the first half, but yeah, it's on Amazon Prime right now. It's out in theaters. Everyone should see this film. Very good. Going to be probably a lot more relevant when the Oscars come around. So, yeah, that's my opinion, suggestion, thoughts, all that. If you've seen the film, let me know what you thought of it. And that's all. One Night in Miami. Great. Also, leave a like and subscribe and all that. Whatever. Bye.